Hello, one and all, and welcome back, yes, back to the Great Unknown audio show with me, your illustrious host, and the most appropriate face for radio, Maxim Jennings. You join me on day 2 of our Tales of Tassi road trip, in a new studio, of course, like we are every single day and in every single instalment of this historic audio show. I am currently sitting at the summit of Mount Amos in Freycinet National Park, Tasmania, and I was going to start this episode as I was making my ascent, but then after reading a bit of information at the bottom of the mountain, it said that it was going to be treacherous, steep and incredibly difficult, and only the most well-equipped athletes would be able to tackle this beast. And so here we are. All hobbies and conventions aside, I put my thinking cap on, had a little dairy milk chocolate bar and a big orange to get me going. And I climbed and climbed, sometimes on all fours, to reach this summit. And I have to say, what a victory it's been, and what an outcome it is. I am currently looking over one of the most glorious national parks I've ever seen, with a lake that stretches for miles and miles. And we are just a bit further north than where we were yesterday, in Port Arthur. I took a 3-hour drive in my lovely yellow MG across multiple towns and past a number of different natural beauties, from beaches to autumnal drives, past a few vineyards as well. So I had a slight remembrance that, or a slight memory, that Tasmania was quite notorious for its vineyards and wine, so that will need to be tried at some point. It wasn't on my itinerary, but there's always time for a little, always room for a little bit of a wiggle to the schedule. So that must be tried at some point. And yes, I left you yesterday whilst I was walking along Cape Rowell. There was a lot more of the trek to do when I said goodbye to my own demise in terms of a professional standpoint, but it really turned out to be a lovely plain at the top of Cape Rowell. I'm not entirely sure what Cape means geographically, whether that does mean a plain or something at the top of a mountain, but it was absolutely beautiful. Some phenomenal rock formations at the top, and some little kind of pointy bits at the end of the cliff faces being smoothly touched by the water, making for some lovely Instagrammable photos. Almost slated rock as you go out right onto the cliff face, and that was absolutely gorgeous. After Cape Rowell, I then visited my accommodation for the night, Port Arthur Caravan Park, which is very nice. First caravan park I think I've stayed at, whilst travelling at least, in one of those dormitories, as I mentioned in the last episode. But I was the only one in the room. They had about 8 different cabins available with 8 beds in each of them, and I was the only one occupying the entire cabin. So that was very nice. I got a choice of the beds, all bunks unfortunately, but it was very nice to not have to worry about any other guests listening to what I had to say in the night, or my snoring, or my profound farting, which can catch a few people off guard. In terms of dinner, we visited the local store and paid £10 for a homemade spaghetti bolognese. With that being said, I did use the entire 500 grams of the beef mince, because there was no way to store it otherwise, and I hadn't eaten all day, so it was a worthy treat. But £10 for a homemade bolognese, goodness. But as caravan parks go, it was pretty nice. It had a lovely trail onto the beach, where I could see a stupendous sunset, shall I say, using that alliteration, sibilance, as I learned in GCSE English, the use of consecutive S's at the start of 2 consecutive words is called sibilance, folks. So, yes, a stupendous sunset with a multitude of different colours, in particular purples and pinks, really standing out at about 6 o'clock in the evening. Unfortunately though, you'll probably be listening to this if you are a die-hard member of the unknown community. You'll be listening to this instalment after listening to the other 2, because I did try and upload, download, edit the last 2 episodes last night, but unfortunately the Wi-Fi speed was so terrible that it took 4 hours for my laptop to download the files, and unfortunately with about 30 megabytes to go it told me that the download had failed, which is absolutely wonderful stuff. But that is the joys of travelling and working on the go, isn't it, folks? So we'll try again tonight and hopefully everything will be all good. Tonight I'm staying at a place called Swansea Backpackers. Swansea is not the town in Wales. That would be quite a long trip back just for one night. As much as I love Swansea and the Mumbles, that won't be my destination of choice for this evening. Swansea is about 70 kilometres away from where I am now. I mean, this national park is quite isolated. It's absolutely ginormous, and it has a number of residential areas, all for quite a pretty sum. So we've had to go out elsewhere, and it also is easier for me to navigate the next day of my drive from Swansea, which is great. And I drove through it on the way here, and it had a number of different necessities. It was called a bottle shop, where you pick your beers up from. The bottle shop that I saw had a nice camel drinking a beer as its logo, which I thought was a nice trick, a good piece of marketing. But no, there's a supermarket there, so hopefully I'll be able to get a cheaper meal for this evening, unlike last night. So the trek itself up to Mount Amos is a bit more open than it was yesterday. You find yourself on quite a steep incline for, what is it? It's about an hour and a half if you're doing it with no real pauses in between, maybe just to catch your breath on the odd occasion. But as I was going into the visitor centre for this national park, you have to get your parks pass, as I've mentioned before in the last episode. I had to get that and put that on my car. And she said, "Oh, you're doing." She said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to do Mount Amos today." She went, "Okay. Just to let you know, if it gets wet, I would be extremely careful." And I can see why, because lots of the rocks are more like boulders. They are massive and they are very smooth. And so even a little stream that goes down the rock can be a bit of a slip hazard. And at points, there is no kind of step. You just have to make your way up the boulder. So with balance not being one of my strongest qualities, I was obviously looking like I was kind of constantly falling over in true Mr. Bean fashion, but we made it up with no real scratches or scars. But it's a fantastic trail. I'm quite nervous about the way down, just because it's steep at some points, and so I might even do like a little bum slide at some points, like I'm on a sled, just to make the possibility of me falling over a bit less probable. That being said, there are some nice rock climbing parts of the trek, if that's something you like. I'm wearing some rather tight Fulham shorts passed down to me from my father. My gluteus maximus is really trying to break these shorts with all of its might, and I'm very fortunate to say there have been no rips as of yet, but we touch wood as I bang the top of my head. We hope that remains the same for the rest of this journey. As we get up to the top, there's a bit of greenery up here, and we are amongst a number of different mountains. This was the most famous, I think, the most well-trodden one, but it is absolutely glorious. We are right on the seafront. About 20 kilometres to my right there is a lighthouse, which I'm sure has some historical context to it that I don't know about, but it's very nice. A few birds of prey out here as well. Great to see them gliding around almost at the same height, which is incredibly nice. I find birds absolutely fascinating. Not to the extent that I go on a bird watch with massive binoculars, but just watching how they act. And I always find it be a great animal to be for a day. It doesn't really matter what kind, unless you are a bird that gets feasted on by other birds. That wouldn't be too great. But I digress. Yeah, not as much wildlife on this trek as there was on the last. And if you do recall, I kept calling these bouncy animals wombats. And I'm sure Steve Backshaw of Deadly 60 would be incredibly annoyed that I did not know that they were in fact wallabies. As in fact, when I saw a few more around the caravan park, a 10-year-old girl pointed out to me that they were not wombats, they were in fact wallabies. Which is probably more common. I mean, they're absolutely everywhere. And I specifically recall when I was walking from the kitchen area of the caravan park, seeing a border collie off lead, just kind of roaming around the park and on the grass, and seeing a group of wallabies. And they almost had a Mexican standoff style where the dog was looking at the wallaby was looking at the dog, and in the blink of an eye, the wallaby got into sprinting fashion, and the border collie went absolutely crazy after it, panting away, almost trying to annihilate it as if it was the last thing it was going to do. And I was quite shocked by that, and I think that dog at some point would have caught at least one wallaby. I didn't stick around to see what it would have looked like if that happened, but I can only think it would have ended in a very quick and painless death, unfortunately. So you'll probably hear from me again when I get to Swansea, close to where, well, not really close, but my family are part Welsh, so close to heritage at least. But for now, I'm going to take in this view at the top of Mount Amos and maybe walk around a few of the other smaller peaks, and you'll hear from me when I get to Swansea. We have been struck by darkness. The moon is shining very bright at Swansea Backpackers, which is a very nice establishment. I'm staying in what they call a pod. Quintessentially, it's one of the bunks in like a 8-bed room, which is just it's very confined, but you have your own little private space. It's quite nice, and it's all for the price of about £15, which isn't too bad considering you're in Tasmania. I made the descent. Obviously, took a few tumbles here and there because it was always going to be too good to be true. And then, funny enough, when I was making my drive back, I found Swansea Backpackers, and as I mentioned in the previous part of this episode, we were right next to the bottle shop, which is obviously very fitting. We didn't manage to go inside. We had to make ventures elsewhere. I've picked up some food for tonight, which I am really excited to start cooking. I'm going for pesto gnocchi with a bit of chicken tenders to chuck in the oven, which should be very nice and enjoyable. Overall, it's been a very satisfying day. I'm glad I got out and about. In my head, I want to go and see the sunrise tomorrow because I think a nice sunrise will probably be more probable than a nice sunset in these conditions. I've found a spot, so in tomorrow's instalment you might hear from me quite early on in the morning, so a few yawns might be here and there. But as I've said it live on here, it kind of means I have to do it, so it's extra motivation for me to do something out of the ordinary. I have got up at that time before, although my parents would say otherwise. But on the rare occasion, it does happen. We'll see, but maybe. I'm trying to talk myself into it. But for now, folks, I do hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Great Unknown audio show, and I really look forward to creating more content for you guys and for myself as a little personal diary. But that's all from me for today. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.